Vanessa sat across from Sabrina in their usual cozy corner booth at the cafe, a place they had visited more times than they could count. She absent-mindedly swirled her coffee spoon, a faint, almost nostalgic smile resting on her lips, the kind that usually followed one of Sabrina's amusing stories. But there was something different about Vanessa today. A distant look flickered in her eyes, as if her mind was somewhere far away. Sabrina picked up on it instantly. She knew her friend too well to miss the subtle shift in her demeanor. "All right, out with it," Sabrina prodded, raising an eyebrow. "What's going on with you and Gavin?" Her tone was light, playful even, but there was a sharpness in her gaze, a knowing look that told Vanessa she wasn't going to let her dodge the question. Vanessa exhaled a long breath, placing her spoon down with a soft clink. There was a brief pause before she finally spoke. "Everything's fine," she murmured, though even she could hear the uncertainty laced in her words. "I mean, he's a great husband. We've been together, what, almost 7 years now?" Her voice drifted as she traced slow, aimless circles on the rim of her coffee cup. "But sometimes, I can't shake the feeling that something's missing. Like, shouldn't there be more?" Sabrina's brow arched slightly, curiosity piqued. "More?" she echoed, a skeptical note in her voice. "Are we talking about excitement? Passion?" Vanessa met her gaze and gave a small nod, her hesitation evident. "Yeah," she admitted, her voice quieter now. "That's exactly it. We're comfortable, and that's not a bad thing. But Gavin seems perfectly happy with things as they are, while I don't know. I just feel like I need something else, something that makes me feel alive again." Sabrina's expression shifted, her intrigue growing. She leaned in, lowering her voice slightly, as though she were about to reveal a secret. "You know," she began, a playful gleam in her eye, "I've been exploring something new myself. Have you ever considered opening things up a little? Giving yourself the space to see other people?" Vanessa's eyes widened, a mix of shock and disbelief flashing across her face. "Wait, you're serious?" she asked, her voice a notch higher than before. Sabrina didn't flinch. She nodded, completely unfazed. "Absolutely. My husband and I talked about it, and honestly, it's done wonders for us. It doesn't have to be anything drastic, just a little freedom to breathe. You'd be surprised. Sometimes, it actually brings couples closer." Vanessa sat back, her mind spinning. Part of her was intrigued, but there was another part, one she wasn't sure she was ready to admit, that felt anxious. "But how would I even bring something like that up to Gavin?" she asked, her voice barely more than a whisper. Sabrina's expression softened, but her words remained direct. "You just be honest. This isn't about him. It's about what you need. Who knows? He might surprise you. A little change might be exactly what your marriage needs." Vanessa inhaled deeply, her eyes drifting toward the window as her thoughts raced. She had no way of knowing that this one conversation would completely shift the way she saw herself and her marriage. She hesitated for a moment before leaning in, lowering her voice to a near whisper. "So, how do I even start that conversation?" Sabrina met her gaze with an almost knowing look. "Honestly, just be upfront. Men appreciate that more than we think. If you try to sugarcoat it, he'll either get confused or assume something's wrong." Vanessa chewed her lip, her forehead creasing with concern. "But what if he thinks I don't love him anymore?" Sabrina shook her head firmly. "It's not about loving him less. You're just asking for something that helps you feel like yourself again. If you explain it the right way, he'll see that it's about personal growth, not about him doing something wrong." Vanessa let out a slow breath, feeling the weight of those words settle in. "So, I tell him I want to feel more alive. That this isn't about us. It's about me needing more." She looked away for a moment, doubt flickering in her eyes. "But Gavin's never been one for unconventional ideas. He likes things stable." Sabrina reached across the table and gave her hand a reassuring squeeze. "If he truly loves you, he'll listen. And if he's willing to hear you out, that's a good sign. It means he's open to working through it, even if the idea feels a little different." Vanessa took another deep breath, her nerves twisting inside her. More than anything, she hoped Gavin would understand. The next evening, Vanessa found herself sitting across from Gavin at their dining room table, her heart thudding in her chest. She had gone over this conversation 100 times in her head, but now that the moment was here, the words suddenly felt foreign, uncertain. She took a steadying breath and began. "Gavin, there's something I've been thinking about," she said, her voice careful, though laced with vulnerability. Gavin looked up from his plate, his expression calm and attentive. "What is it, Vanessa?" he asked, his voice gentle, inviting. Vanessa swallowed, her palms slightly damp as she gathered her thoughts. "I've been feeling restless," she admitted. "Not because of you. It's something inside me. Like there's something else out there I need to experience." Gavin's expression softened, and he set his fork down, giving her his full attention. Vanessa hesitated, searching for the right words. "I've been wondering if maybe giving each other a little more freedom could help. Not because I don't love you, I do, but because I think it might actually be good for us." She studied his face, anxiety gnawing at her, hoping he would understand. For a long moment, Gavin didn't say anything. His expression was unreadable as he processed her words. Finally, he gave a slow nod, his voice steady but tinged with something unreadable. "So, you're saying you want us to open things up?" Vanessa's heart skipped a beat. She nodded, her voice barely audible. "Just for a while. Just to see what it's like. I really think it could help us." Gavin's gaze remained steady, his face composed as he leaned back in his chair. "I see," he said, his tone surprisingly even. "If that's what you need, Vanessa, I won't stand in your way." A wave of relief rushed through her, but beneath it was something else, a quiet tension she hadn't anticipated. She had braced herself for resistance, maybe even an argument. Instead, Gavin had taken it in stride, almost too easily. He folded his arms, his expression unreadable as he studied her. Then, after a pause, his tone shifted slightly. "So, this freedom," he said, his voice measured. "I assume this goes both ways?" Vanessa froze, a sharp realization hitting her like a jolt. She had been so focused on her own desire to explore that she hadn't really considered how Gavin might feel about it. She had assumed he'd just go along with it, accepting her need for something more. But now, looking into his eyes, she wasn't so sure. "Well, yes, I suppose," she said hesitantly. "If that's something you'd want too." Her voice wavered slightly. Gavin nodded slowly, his expression steady, unreadable. "Thank you for being honest, Vanessa. I think I understand what you're asking." He let out a measured breath, his gaze never leaving hers. "I'm okay with it. I want you to be happy," he said, his voice calm, too calm. Vanessa forced a smile, but it felt thin, fragile. She had expected some resistance, maybe even an argument. Instead, Gavin had accepted it without hesitation, and that left her feeling strangely unsteady, as though she had lost control of a conversation she thought she had orchestrated. A small part of her had wanted him to react, to show some kind of emotion that matched the weight of what they were discussing. But he didn't, and that, more than anything, unsettled her. "Thank you, Gavin," she murmured, her voice barely above a whisper. "That really means a lot." Gavin gave her a small smile, but there was something in his expression she couldn't quite decipher. Something that made her chest tighten. It wasn't just agreement. It was as if he had made a decision of his own. That feeling stuck with Vanessa, lingering beneath her skin like an itch she couldn't quite scratch. A few days later, she and Sabrina found themselves stepping into a neon-lit nightclub, the kind of place they hadn't set foot in for years. The bass thumped beneath their feet, bodies moved in sync to the music, and flashes of colored light streaked through the dim space. There was an electricity in the air, a kind of reckless energy that made Vanessa feel alive in a way she hadn't in a long time. Sabrina shot her a teasing grin. Well, look who finally decided to come out," she called over the music. "How does it feel?" Vanessa laughed, though the sound was a little unsteady. "Honestly, I'm still trying to process it. I told Gavin, and he just agreed. No fight, no pushback. He was so calm about it." Sabrina raised an eyebrow. "Wow, guess he's more open-minded than I thought. See? I told you he'd get it if you just explained." Vanessa nodded, but a small frown tugged at her lips. Yeah, but it was almost too easy. Like, no hesitation at all. Sabrina chuckled, shaking her head. That's because he's thinking about his own options, too. Trust me, guys like to act cool, but he's probably already planning his own adventure. Don't overthink it, Vanessa. This is going to be good for both of you. Vanessa tried to push down the uneasy feeling stirring in her stomach. She took a deep breath and forced a smile. And what about you? She asked, shifting the focus. Does your husband know you're here tonight? Sabrina hesitated, just for a fraction of a second, before shrugging it off. Oh, he's off on some hiking trip with his buddies. We've got an understanding, no questions asked. Just trust. Vanessa raised an eyebrow. So he doesn't care where you go? Or who you're with? Sabrina laughed, waving off the concern. She grabbed Vanessa's hand, pulling her toward the bar. Come on, Vanessa. Honesty is great, but he doesn't need to know everything. This is about freedom. A flicker of doubt passed through Vanessa's mind, but before she could dwell on it, Sabrina ordered them a round of drinks. She raised her glass, eyes twinkling with excitement, to freedom and new adventures. Vanessa clinked her glass against Sabrina's, taking a long sip. The drink was strong, sweet, and warm as it spread through her chest, smoothing out the edges of her nerves. She let herself sink into the moment, laughing as they made their way to the dance floor, losing themselves in the music and the energy of the crowd. Not long after, Vanessa felt a tap on her shoulder. She turned to find a familiar face, Adrian, a colleague she had known for years. But tonight, under the club's flickering lights, he looked different, more confident, more dangerous. Vanessa, he said with a smirk, didn't expect to see you here. She smiled back, feeling an unfamiliar thrill spark in her chest. I could say the same about you. Adrian introduced his friend to Sabrina, and soon the four of them were deep in conversation, laughing between drinks, the music thumping around them. With each round, Vanessa felt the tension in her fade. She let herself relax, let herself be swept up in the moment. As the night wore on, the group slowly split off into pairs, each person drifting into their own little corner of the crowded space. Vanessa and Adrian ended up in a quieter spot, their conversation growing more personal, more intimate. This feels different, Adrian said, his voice low, the space between them growing smaller. I've never seen you like this before. Vanessa felt a flutter in her stomach, a mixture of excitement and nerves. I guess I feel different tonight, she admitted, her voice barely above the hum of the club. It was a simple answer, but in that moment, it felt true. Everything after that felt natural, as if the decision had already been made. They left the club together, laughter spilling between them as they stepped into the cool night air. The city lights glowed around them, casting long shadows on the sidewalk. Neither of them hesitated. Neither of them questioned it. They simply moved forward, as if this had been inevitable all along. A short cab ride later, they arrived at a small motel on the outskirts of town. No words were needed. They stepped inside together, their intentions clear. For Vanessa, the night felt like a doorway into something new, a taste of the freedom she had longed for, finally within reach. But when morning arrived, sunlight creeping in through the curtains, the thrill of the night had already begun to fade. What was left behind was something different, a strange mix of satisfaction and uncertainty. Vanessa dressed quietly, glancing at Adrian as he slept soundly beside her. She had gotten what she wanted, hadn't she? She had chased the excitement, broken free of the routine. Yet, as she slipped out of the motel room into the quiet morning air, her mind drifted back to Gavin. His calm, unreadable expression lingered in her thoughts. And for the first time, she wondered if maybe, just maybe, she had underestimated him. Vanessa arrived home just as the house was settling into its usual quiet, a silence that felt almost unnerving. Normally, by this time, Gavin would be up, sipping his morning coffee, preparing for the day ahead. But today, the house felt different, almost hollow. A wave of unease crept over her as she moved through the rooms, checking the bedroom, the kitchen, even stepping out into the backyard. There was no sign of him. Frowning, she reached for her phone and dialed his number. After a few rings, Gavin picked up, his voice steady but distant. Hey, Vanessa. What's up? Relief flooded through her, but it was quickly followed by a flicker of guilt. Gavin, where are you? She asked. I didn't see you this morning. At the office, he replied, his tone detached. A new project came in. It's going to keep me busy for a while, probably through the weekend. Vanessa exhaled, her shoulders relaxing slightly. A strange mix of guilt and relief washed over her. Oh, okay. I was just wondering since you weren't here. Everything's fine, Vanessa, he reassured her. Just a lot to handle right now. I'll be home by dinner. She took a deep breath, still feeling that small knot of unease in her stomach. All right, take care. The call ended, but the strange feeling lingered. That evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, bathing the house in a warm golden light, Vanessa heard the familiar sound of Gavin's footsteps at the door. She greeted him with a smile as he stepped inside, setting his briefcase down by the entryway. Long day? She asked, matching his tired smile. You could say that, he murmured, heading straight for the kitchen. He poured himself a glass of water, his movements slow and deliberate. Vanessa watched him closely, searching his face for any sign of emotion, anything to tell her what he was thinking. But his expression was unreadable, his calm demeanor feeling almost too controlled. Wanting to test the waters, she eased into the topic. So, she said, keeping her tone casual, how do you feel about everything? Gavin glanced up from his glass, raising an eyebrow. Everything? He echoed, his voice even. Vanessa offered a sheepish smile, her nerves creeping in. You know, this open marriage thing, has it meant anything to you? Are you getting anything out of it? Gavin set his glass down, considering her words. Honestly, I haven't had time to think about it, he admitted. This project's been taking up all my energy. Maybe once things settle, I'll have a clearer perspective on that part of things. A flicker of disappointment ran through Vanessa, though she quickly masked it with a nod. Yeah, I get that. Gavin shrugged, then smoothly shifted the focus. But enough about me, he said, his voice suddenly more direct. What about you? Didn't you and Sabrina go out recently? Vanessa's pulse quickened. For a brief moment, she considered telling him about Adrian, but the words refused to come. Instead, she kept it vague. Yeah, just some drinks, a little dancing. Ended up crashing at Sabrina's place. She kept her tone light, but Gavin's expression remained unreadable. And how did it make you feel? He asked, his voice calm. But there was something beneath it, something searching. Is this really what you wanted? Vanessa hesitated before answering, the words slipping out almost before she could think. Actually, yeah, Gavin. I feel good. Like I have this energy again, this spark I haven't felt in years. For a split second, something flickered in Gavin's eyes, but it vanished as quickly as it had appeared. He nodded slowly. Well, I'm happy for you, Vanessa, he said, his voice measured. Vanessa smiled back, but something about his quiet approval left her unsettled. She had expected some kind of reaction, maybe defensiveness, maybe even a little jealousy. But his calm acceptance made her feel as though she was missing something, like she had been outmaneuvered in a game she didn't even realize she was playing. Over the next few days, Vanessa found herself constantly texting both Adrian and Sabrina, caught up in the excitement of something new. Adrian was flirtatious, charismatic, full of excitement about their night together. He hinted at a grown-up party he was throwing over the weekend, something he promised would be unlike anything she'd ever experienced. He insisted she bring Sabrina along, and though Vanessa was intrigued, something in her hesitated. She needed more information. Dialing Sabrina's number, she waited as a bundle of nerves and excitement tangled together inside her. Sabrina picked up almost instantly. Hey, Vanessa, you all set for tomorrow? Vanessa chuckled, though it sounded uncertain even to her. Almost. I wanted to ask you about Adrian's party. He's been hyping it up, but it sounds different. Oh, it will be different, Sabrina said with a knowing laugh. Adrian throws the kind of parties people don't forget. Vanessa hesitated, then shifted gears. What about Gavin? He's been acting so distant lately, burying himself in work. I can't tell if he's really okay with all this or just too distracted to care. Sabrina let out a light laugh, but there was an edge to it, almost teasing. Oh, come on, Vanessa. He's probably using work as an excuse. Maybe he's already making plans of his own. Men hate admitting they're doing the same thing. It's like they want you to believe they're above it all. A flicker of something. Jealousy? Uncertainty? Rose inside Vanessa, but she swallowed it down. Maybe you're right. I just wish he'd show something. Anything. Sabrina's tone softened, but it still held that confident, almost dismissive reassurance. Forget about Gavin for a night. Let yourself go. Trust me, you need this. Adrian's party is exactly the kind of escape you're looking for. Vanessa felt her curiosity build again, the nervousness giving way to something more reckless. All right, she said. But, Sabrina, when you say fun, what exactly do you mean? Sabrina's voice took on a playful, mischievous tone. Let's just say you might pick up a few new phrases. Ever heard of Milk Brothers or Captain's Wheel? Vanessa blinked, feeling a mix of intrigue and embarrassment. Captain's Wheel? What's that? Sabrina laughed, the sound rich with amusement. Oh, you'll see. Let's just say it involves a little teamwork. Get ready for a night you won't forget. Vanessa felt her pulse quicken, anticipation curling through her. The thrill of the unknown was intoxicating. This was exactly what she had been craving, and she was ready for it. By the time Saturday night arrived, Vanessa had her story prepared. She told Gavin she'd be out with Sabrina, making it sound like nothing more than a typical girls' night. Gavin barely looked up from his laptop, his attention locked on whatever work had been consuming him for days. Have fun, Vanessa. Don't worry about me. I'll be buried in this project all night. A wave of relief washed over her. All right, she replied, forcing a light-hearted tone. Just don't overdo it, okay? He gave her a distracted smile, his eyes never fully meeting hers. And then, as she stepped out the door, a rush of anticipation surged through her. Gavin's calm indifference almost felt like permission, and for the first time in a long time, she was stepping into something unknown. Adrian's house was even more impressive than she had imagined. A warm glow spilled from the backyard, reflecting off the shimmering surface of the pool. The music pulsed through the night air, blending with the hum of laughter and conversation. As they walked in, Vanessa realized the party was far bigger and wilder than she had expected. Dozens of unfamiliar faces milled about, drinks in hand, their energy infectious. Adrian spotted them almost immediately, his grin widening as he waved them over. Vanessa, glad you made it. His voice carried over the noise, warm and inviting. He greeted Sabrina with a quick hug before turning back to Vanessa, his eyes gleaming. By the way, he added with a chuckle, the pool's fair game tonight. Did you bring a swimsuit? Vanessa blinked in surprise. No, I didn't know there was a pool. Adrian shrugged, his smile never fading. No worries. Underwear works fine. Or, he added with a playful wink, you can always go without. No judgments here. Vanessa felt a flush creep up her neck. Sabrina, completely unbothered, kicked off her shoes and tossed her purse onto a lounge chair. Come on, Vanessa, she called, grinning as she dove in with a splash. Vanessa hesitated. Before she could overthink it, Adrian handed her a drink. She took it, swallowing a sip and her nerves at the same time. The atmosphere was intoxicating, light, carefree, charged with a sense of reckless abandon. It reminded her of college, of the kind of nights where rules didn't exist, where nothing mattered except the moment. The music thumped, bodies swayed, and laughter came easy. Drinks flowed, conversations blurred, and soon Vanessa found herself caught up in the energy of the night. What started as harmless fun quickly turned into something bolder. Laughter became flirtation. Playful dares escalated into something more intimate. People swapped dance partners, hands lingered longer, touches grew bolder. The boundaries Vanessa had imagined, had assured herself would stay in place, began to blur. Sabrina was in her element, leaning effortlessly into the wild energy of the night. Around them, the music swelled, the lights cast a hazy glow, and the teasing turned more suggestive. Then Adrian was beside her, his arm draped lightly around her waist, his voice low against her ear. So, Vanessa, ready for a new experience? His touch was easy, familiar. His gaze held an invitation she had been flirting with all night. Vanessa's pulse quickened. The party had pulled her in, wrapped her in its electricity. But now, in this moment, standing at the edge of something more, she hesitated. She had spent weeks chasing this feeling, craving the thrill of something new. And yet, "I think so," she murmured, though her voice lacked certainty. Around them, the crowd had begun to splinter, small groups breaking off into quieter corners of the house. Vanessa found herself in a circle of strangers, voices low, laughter softer, the atmosphere shifting into something heavier, more intimate. Across the room, Sabrina caught her eye and raised her glass in a silent toast, as if to say, "This is it. Just let go." But suddenly, something inside Vanessa shifted. The thrill she had been chasing, the one that had seemed so exhilarating in theory, felt different now. The hands reaching toward her, the voices coaxing her forward, the warmth of Adrian's body so close. It wasn't excitement she felt anymore. It was something else, something heavier. Vanessa took a step back, inhaling deeply. "Actually, I don't think I'm ready for this. Not yet." Her voice was soft but firm. A few of them exchanged knowing glances, some nodding in understanding, others looking slightly disappointed. Adrian, to his credit, offered her a small, patient smile. He brushed his fingers against her arm in a reassuring way. "That's okay, Vanessa," he said gently. "Sometimes it just takes time." But Sabrina wasn't so quick to let it go. "Come on, Vanessa," she coaxed, her voice laced with amusement. "You were having fun. Just relax. You'll love it if you give it a chance." Vanessa shook her head, her discomfort now clear. "I really can't, Sabrina. I just need more time." Adrian gave Sabrina a knowing look before squeezing her shoulder. "It's fine," he said smoothly. "Vanessa should go at her own pace. Besides," he added with a playful grin, "I'm sure there are plenty of people here willing to keep you entertained." Sabrina rolled her eyes but relented, quickly getting swept back into the party. The night surged on, growing wilder, but Vanessa no longer felt like she belonged. She slipped into an empty room, closing the door softly behind her. For the first time all night, she could hear herself think. The sounds of the party were muffled, distant now. She poured herself a glass of wine, took a slow sip, and let out a breath she hadn't realized she was holding. And then, without meaning to, her thoughts drifted back to Gavin, to the way he had barely reacted when she told him about her night out, the unreadable look in his eyes, the calmness that didn't feel like calm at all. Had she misunderstood him? Had she been so focused on chasing excitement that she hadn't seen what was right in front of her? A wave of doubt rolled over her. Hours passed, and the party finally began to slow. The crowd thinned, the lights dimmed, and people trickled out, voices lower now, softer. Sabrina, still glowing with the high of the night, found Vanessa sitting alone and nudged her playfully. "Hey, you good? You disappeared on me." Vanessa forced a smile, but it felt fragile. "Yeah, I don't think this is really my thing." Sabrina laughed, shaking her head. "You just need a warm-up. Next time, you'll feel right at home." Vanessa didn't answer, because for the first time, she wasn't sure she wanted there to be a next time. By the time she left, the sun had started to rise, its pale light creeping into the sky. The drive home was quiet, the only sound the hum of the engine and the occasional flicker of streetlights passing by. But Vanessa's mind was anything but still. For weeks, she had convinced herself that this was what she wanted, that this was what she needed. But now, all she could think about was the one question she had tried to ignore all night. What had Gavin been doing while she was at the party? And for the first time, she wasn't sure she wanted to know the answer. When Vanessa stepped into her house, a heavy silence greeted her. The darkness felt different tonight, thicker, colder. She sighed, assuming Gavin had already gone to bed. But as she made her way upstairs, a strange chill crept up her spine. Something was off. Her breath caught when she saw their bed, perfectly made, untouched. The room was too neat, too empty. Gavin was gone. Her eyes darted to the closet. A few of his clothes were missing. The comforter from his side of the bed was gone. Panic squeezed her chest. Her gaze landed on the nightstand, and her stomach dropped. A stack of papers sat neatly on top. She stepped closer, her hands trembling as she picked them up. The bold, unforgiving letters at the top of the page sent a shockwave through her. Divorce. The word screamed at her from the document, but her brain refused to accept it. Her vision blurred, and a strangled whisper escaped her lips. This can't be happening. Suddenly, everything made sense. Gavin's unsettling calm, his quiet nods when she spoke of the open marriage. He hadn't been agreeing. He had been waiting. Her fingers fumbled for her phone before she even realized what she was doing. She dialed his number, heart pounding against her ribs. Voicemail. She tried again. The call rang and rang, but no answer. And just like that, Gavin was gone. In the days that followed, Vanessa's desperation grew. She left voicemail after voicemail, sent text after text, each one more frantic than the last. But there was nothing. No response. No explanation. It was as if he had vanished completely. Then, finally, a message arrived. But it wasn't from Gavin. The text was from his lawyer. Cold, formal, impersonal. The message was clear. Gavin wanted out. No conversation. No discussion. Just finality. And just when she thought things couldn't possibly get worse, they did. At work, Vanessa quickly noticed the shift. The friendly nods, the warm smiles, gone. Conversations stopped when she walked by. The once familiar faces of her colleagues now held something new, judgment. It didn't take long to find out why. Gavin had gathered everything. Her text with Adrian, the photos, even the details of the party. Somehow, it had all made its way into the company's whispers, spreading like wildfire. And her employer, strict and conservative, didn't tolerate scandal. The summons to her supervisor's office was swift. Their expression was unreadable, but the disappointment in their voice was unmistakable. Vanessa was informed that her conduct was under review. Her career, the job she had worked so hard for, was slipping through her fingers, and the nightmare was far from over. By the time her court date arrived, Vanessa felt like a ghost, moving through her own life in a daze. She sat in the courtroom, numb, as Gavin's meticulous preparation unraveled before her. Evidence, private texts, photos, surveillance records from a private investigator detailing her outings with Sabrina, her flirtations with Adrian, even her presence at that infamous party. It was all laid bare, dissected piece by piece, with nowhere to hide. Her choices, once so thrilling, now felt reckless, naive. Gavin had been watching, not with anger, not with desperation, with precision. And now, every detail was being used against her. Her betrayal was no longer just between them. It had become a public spectacle. The divorce proceedings were brutal. Nothing was off limits. Every aspect of her personal life was dragged into the spotlight. Her messages, the nights out, the lies. She wasn't just losing her marriage. She was losing everything. The final blow came swiftly. Her job gone. Adrian, also fired, his reputation destroyed alongside hers. And then, the one thing she hadn't seen coming. Gavin had sent everything to Eric, Sabrina's husband. And the truth hit like a wrecking ball. Sabrina's so-called understanding with Eric had been a lie. He hadn't known. He hadn't agreed. When he found out, he filed for divorce immediately. The fallout was swift. Friends turned their backs, alliances shattered overnight. The once admiring circle that had embraced Sabrina's boldness quickly abandoned her. Humiliated and furious, she cut Vanessa out of her life completely, blaming her, and Gavin, for everything. And just like that, Vanessa was alone. The scandal spread like wildfire. Friends distanced themselves. Neighbors whispered. Even family, once supportive, now looked at her with quiet disappointment. Meanwhile, Gavin became the image of grace, the wronged husband, handling his pain with quiet dignity. And Vanessa? She became the villain of the story. One evening, after days of silence, Vanessa finally reached him. Gavin agreed to meet her. She needed to see him, needed to understand. They sat across from each other, the weight of everything pressing down between them. Tears welled in her eyes as she reached for his hand. "Gavin, please," she whispered, her voice breaking. "I made a mistake, a huge one. I thought I thought this would bring us closer, help us understand each other better. I was only with Adrian once, and at the party, I couldn't even go through with it. Please forgive me. Gavin exhaled slowly, his gaze heavy. Vanessa, he said, his voice calm, unreadable. When someone suggests an open marriage, it usually means they've already made up their mind. The marriage was already broken. You just didn't realize it. Her heart clenched. You weren't honest with me, he continued. You wanted both worlds, wanted to explore, but didn't want to lose me. You kept secrets. And that's where the real damage happened. Vanessa looked away, shame pooling in her chest. He was right. She had lied. She had hidden things. And in doing so, she had destroyed the very foundation of their marriage. Gavin sighed, running a hand through his hair. I wanted this to end cleanly. Maybe I went too far. Maybe it seems cruel. But the moment you started keeping things from me, that was the moment I knew we were done. He met her gaze, his expression softer now. But there was no warmth, no anger. Just finality. I don't think we can fix this, Vanessa. I just don't. And in that moment, she knew. It was over. That night, as Vanessa drove home, the world outside blurred into streaks of headlights and streetlights. She had spent so much time chasing something new, something exciting, convinced it would make her feel alive. Instead, she had unraveled everything. Her marriage, her career, her friendships, her own sense of self. And now, she had nothing. Choices have consequences. She had learned that the hard way. And sometimes, those consequences leave you with nothing but regret. As she pulled into the empty driveway, she closed her eyes, exhaling shakily. She didn't know if she'd ever find forgiveness or peace. But for now, all she had was this moment, and the weight of everything she had lost.